It's recording.
All right, how about that? Hey, I want to welcome everybody to a social media breakfast this morning. I want to introduce the panel we have this morning, and this is about podcasting. And each of these three guests do a podcast in their own right, or they do something that's sort of a weekly show type thing that they do air over the internet. Jason Falls from Kentucky is one of the most well-received, informative, and entertaining keynote speakers available today. I copied this from his website. His witty, relaxed style engages audience as he distills the complexities of digital marketing, technology, search engine optimization, and public relations into an easily understandable nugget. Besides traveling the country speaking about digital marketing, he also helps run a podcast called 100 Proof, the Badass Radio Show. And a shameless plug, he also is the author of this book called No Bullshit Social Media. This is Jason Falls.
Hi.
Hi, Jason.
Don't clap.
Janet Johnson from the Minneapolis, Minnesota area has spent the last 14 years online marketing, and she also helps business owners grow their business with strategies from branding and optimization of their social media to specific ways to take the customer from a fan or connection to a sale. She co-hosts a podcast show called Business Growth Time. This teaches business owners specific strategies to grow their business both online and offline. And today we welcome Janet.
Hi, Janet.
Hello.
Bridget Willard from California is the personality behind You Too Can Be a Guru, a 1-minute social media tip show on YouTube about common sense social media situations that we all run into from time to time. You may not be an expert, but you too can be a guru.
Good job.
Recently, Bridget accepted a job at WordImpress as their marketing manager. And if you don't know where to find Bridget, she can be found at WordCamps all over California. And she also hosts a Blab series on Thursday nights called WP Blab with Jason Tucker. Bridget and I have yet to do karaoke, but we can only hope. And this is Bridget. Welcome, Bridget.
Hi.
Hey, Bridget.
I'm the co-host with Jason Tucker, just for the record.
Okay.
He brings the WordPressness.
That means Jason must be watching. Otherwise,
probably not this early.
Let's start off with Jason. We talked back in September at the Rockstar Media event up there, and you just kind of kicked off the 100 Proof show. How did that come about for you?
So I'd had a dozen people on me for a year or two to do a podcast, and I'm an old radio guy. I started out my career as a radio producer. Right out of college, actually, I was a network producer at ABC Radio in New York. So I have this radio background. I've always been, fascinated with podcasting. I obviously have some technical skill and knowledge on how to do it. And I'd had, a dozen or so people just on me about doing a podcast for several years, but I never had time. And by the time I got around to really thinking about it and wanting to do it, everybody and their brother had a marketing podcast. So I was just completely disinterested I was like, I don't want to be another guy with another marketing podcast interviewing the same people. And so I actually had a friend of mine here locally who pitched a concept for a podcast to me that you guys are welcome to grab this concept and go with it. I didn't do it. He pitched this concept to me of doing an on-demand morning show. So competing against the local morning radio folks, but in a podcast that was on demand. It would be like a 30-minute thing that you could record at 5:30 in the morning. You'd have to really commit to it. I mean, it'd have to be something that you could really go after. But I thought, that would be fun because it's not marketing. It could be very Louisville based. So it would be something else that I could pursue as an interest. And I started concepting that and thinking about it, and it just didn't feel right. And then one night I'm thinking about this podcast. I opened up my Facebook stream, and I have a friend who's a copywriter named Tanya Daka. And I saw 2 consecutive posts from her. One was of a new tattoo she had gotten, and the other was of her on her Harley. And I thought, that's what I want my podcast to be about. I want it to be about what makes people badasses, what makes people march to the beat of their own drum, do things a little differently. That's something I could get behind. And so that was the core concept. I wrote the treatment in about 20 minutes, and then I emailed Tanya and said, do you want to be my co-host? And that's how it started.
Great. That's fantastic. And how well is the show done? Can you judge how many people listen to it or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, we use Libsyn, which is a very popular podcasting service to host and whatnot. It's got good analytics and metrics behind it. We're getting a couple 3,000 downloads a week or so. I don't really look at the numbers because the important thing for me on doing this podcast, because it's not a marketing podcast, I'm not going after sponsors proactively trying to monetize it yet. I'm doing it because it's fun, because I enjoy doing it, because it's a topic that I can be passionate about. If the money comes, if the audience comes, that's great. So I don't really look at the metrics. But, we started out with a couple hundred. We're now up to a couple, maybe 3,000 a week downloading the podcast. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And so the measure of success for me, and I think the measure of success for any podcast, needs to be, are you enjoying it? Because if you're not, it's a waste of your time.
That's about right. Janet, how did you get started with a partner on your podcast?
I actually have had mine for, we're going almost on 2 years. It's been a weekly show. It started, though, as social media hangout time. And I changed co-hosts during the interim, but we continued and changed the name. So it was an interesting transition. So one partner left, and then I brought on a new partner. And so we changed the name because he's not necessarily social media. He's actually built one of the biggest networking business groups in the city of Detroit. And I knew him all the way back from high school. So we bring in 80s tunes to our show, and we try to, because we grew up in the 80s. So we thought, let's bring a little twist and have some fun with this. So we typically will ask people, what's your favorite 80s song? Or we'll play a song and make them guess it, just kind of have fun with it. So yes, Jason, we do that. We have a blast because the two of us just, hit it off. And like I said, we don't need to age ourselves, but we are aging ourselves. We've known each other since high school. So ours is about marketing, but it talks about the social media side of things, and it also talks about just the business building side of things through networking, because that's where he comes from. And his name is Terry Bean. So he might be joining us during the Blab too.
Okay, and is he from the Minneapolis area?
He's from Detroit. So we record our shows through Blab. We originally started through Google Hangouts. I had wanted to do video, so we have a YouTube channel along with it because I'm a big believer in video. But I have noticed we've kind of not been focusing on the YouTube side of it as much, because I do believe a podcast and a YouTube are just two different medias and two different audiences. So it is something that, you learn as you go. And it's something that, I think for the video side of things, if we were going to be focusing on the video, we'd have to really clip it and make it, because an hour, you really got to grab their attention with video. But it's great for communicating with your community through Blab if they want to join you live through the recording. And then we use the Libsyn also, and our shows go out about 3 weeks later.
And how's the popularity of that show for you? You getting some good feedback? You getting a lot of views? How do you measure?
It is similar to Jason's. It's very similar. I am not concerned as much about the views and I do look at it, and it is very similar to his. We're actually in the hundreds though, because we are going up against lots of marketing podcasts, and so it's not actually. Our goal of it is more. It's generated us business. So that's what we like for our podcast. It's almost that, false sense of, ooh, they have a podcast. Ooh, and it's like, to me, it's no big deal, but it's that consistency, and it's gained me clients just because of running the podcast.
Bottom line, is that what it was started for, or
yes,
is that a byproduct? Okay, I didn't know if that was just, we started this, and then, oh, by the way, I got clients, or you wanted clients, so you started this. So, okay.
No, it was just it was to increase that brand awareness and your authority, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, Bridget joins us from California this morning. I'm glad she got up early.
Thank you.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about your history. You started kind of a little video show with You Too Can Be a Guru, and how did that develop?
Oh, I kind of got dared by one of my friends on Twitter. Not really dare. It was a nicer dare, but basically it was a dare. Like, you really should do this. She'd seen one of my social media presentations and said I was super animated. I should totally do video. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not animated at all. Like, doesn't everybody talk like this? Anyway, I was like, what am I even going to say? And so I thought I would answer the question everybody asks me, which is, how do you start a conversation on Twitter? And so I just got my iPhone out and I just went, okay, this is You Too Can Be a Guru, right? So I just thought I'm going to do it for a minute because that's about my attention span and it shouldn't be really that long. I hate when now I'm on this show that's like, the last episode was 2 hours, but it's kind of like how I write. It used to be hard to write 300 words. Now you've got to stop me at like 12, 15. It's something you just get into, but I like the consumable fastness of it. Like, you just want one little thing. And so anyway, so I did it, and then she sent it to Ted Rubin. He was like, this is so good. And then her name is Jen and Vermos. And anyway, so I go, well, I'll just do the next question everybody asks me. Because it's funny because people come up to me like they have to confess why they don't like Twitter. It's almost like, oh yeah, I like Jesus, but it's like when you're a Christian and people come up to you and they're like, they have to give you all these excuses why they're not going to church. Like, I don't care why you're not going to church. They do the same thing with me with Twitter. They're like, well, I tried Twitter, but I don't get it. I mean, how do you even start a conversation? Are those people even real? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whoa, Nelly. I am not your confessor. You're not accountable to me. You don't have to tell me why you're not using Twitter. I'm just a huge Twitter nerd. Twitter changed my life. So anyway, so I just started doing it. And then the third episode in, I go, ooh, I wonder if anybody's using the hashtag Guru Minute. Because I figured a yoga person would be using it, right? Like a yogi, because they're the real gurus. Nobody was using the hashtag. So I'm like, that's it. Guru Minute was born. And so, WP Blab started just kind of as a whim by Jason Tucker as a sister show to WP Water Cooler. And it's all about WordPress. And he's like, why don't you go on Blab with me? Wouldn't this be so much fun? And I'm like, I don't know that much about WordPress. But he's like, oh, yeah, that would be great. So we just had our 11th episode. And that's Thursday nights at 7:30 Pacific time. Sorry, Iowa. But anyway, it's archived on their YouTube channel. It has like 2,300 subscribers, but WordPress is so niched out. Like, that's huge, So, but yeah, so I just kind of fell into it. It didn't really, it's not, I don't know if it's an RSS feed that's on the iTunes store, blah, blah, blah. But, podcasting now is just having a regular show, isn't it? Right. So WP Water Cooler is on Google Hangouts. And WP Blab is on Blab. So you never know how long these platforms are going to last. So it's archived on the YouTube.
So you do that. You archive your videos from Blab then to YouTube? Yeah.
It's on the YouTube channel, WP Water Cooler.
Let's talk a little bit about WordCamp. My God, I think you've been to 500 of them. What's the appeal of WordCamp? I see you.
Yeah, those are my name badges. I went to one WordCamp in 2013 in my county, and I just this is cool. So I just went to another one, and then this year I've been to 3 physically, and I watched WordCamp US online. WordCamps are great because a lot of social media, like conferences, are like a mortgage payment. So they're really expensive to go to. I mean, there's one in San Diego that's like, over $1,000. So that's great. I'm glad, but I'm not going to that because my rent, I got to pay my rent before I go to some social media conference. Anyway, but it's only $40. So if you have a WordCamp around you, you should totally go because as content marketers, we're always pushing people to a website, aren't we? So we want them to be on Twitter, and then we want them to be on our YouTube, and we want them to see our Pinterest, and they want them to see our Instagram. But everybody's always pushing you to a website. So WordPress powers 25% of the internet, so it's a good one to use. It's a great content management system, and you can learn a lot about not just being a developer and coding and stuff, but about business and marketing and content writing and just design, what appeals to people, that kind of thing. And to me, you meet the most amazing, accessible people. All the speakers are around. Nobody's like sitting around in a green room being a super snob or anything like that. And I just like it because the people are generous with their time and their knowledge, and they're not like all networky, pushing their business card in your face. And it's just not like that. They're just normal people, and they act like normal people.
I see Iowa had one several years ago. So, and Iowa's on the cutting edge. So it must not have really taken hold here.
Well, you have to have a meetup. Why aren't you guys in the Silicon Prairie? No? I don't know where that is. I know you're in the middle of the map. Geography's not my thing. Let's talk about Twitter.
Jason, what do you recommend if people are just going to say, I want to start something like this? What are steps 1, 2, and 3 that you would give as advice?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is just go do it. So even if you're just opening up a Blab and having conversations with people, or if you want to use Google Hangouts, or if you want to just use a Skype call and record yourself talking to someone for a little while, to just kind of get used to, basically what you're doing on a podcast is broadcasting. And not everybody knows how to do that. Not everybody can carry on a conversation in a clean, enunciated way where you're not talking over top of each other and whatnot, and you're not fumbling with your words. So just practice. Just go have conversations with folks, record them, listen to yourself, give yourself constructive criticism. So step 1 is to just experiment, because these platforms, Blab is free. You come here with a Twitter account, you plug in, you go. Skype, maybe it costs you a little bit of money if you want an account to be able to record stuff or whatever, but it doesn't cost a whole lot to experiment with this kind of thing. But if you're going to start a show and you want to start recording and archiving and whatnot, I would take some time to actually sit down and say, okay, what are we going to talk about? What's the purpose? What's our audience? Who are we trying to reach? Just like any other marketing effort, understand who your audience is, what it is you're trying to communicate or convey. Why are people going to come and listen to you? Because if you define those things, your show will be more cohesive. Your audience will feel like they're getting something out of it. You'll have a better understanding of, when I have a guest on the show, what questions do I ask them? Because again, we're trying to deliver on a promise here. With 100 Proof, our promise is we're going to ask people who come to the show, we're going to pick people we think are badasses, and we're going to ask them, well, why are you different? What makes you march to a different beat than the rest of us, so that we can learn from that? And if we aspire to be badasses, then we can emulate. If we don't aspire to be badasses, we can avoid that kind of behavior. So that's kind of what we do when we ask the guests, is we profile who they are and why they're badasses, and then we try to drag a little bit out of them on what made you that way. So making sort of a list of what your purpose is, who your audience is and whatnot, will make the content better. All the technical stuff, just go Google it or find a guide to podcasting or whatnot. You can figure out all the technical stuff. That's minimal things. Understanding strategically why you're doing it is probably where you ought to start once you're ready to start a real show.
Okay. Janet, how is the follow-up process when people... What's the turnaround time, I guess? You record a show or you do a show live or whatnot, and how is the turnaround time as far as when you air that and then it comes back, or people see a rebroadcast from 6 months ago and they say, I remember that show you talked about this, that, and the other thing, and it's like for you to remember what you talked about? Or how is that? How do you keep track of the archives?
Well, we do a blog. So basically the process that we have is we record on Blab. We bring in guests. Sometimes we do it every other week. Sometimes we have a guest and then it's just the two of us. Then we have a guest and then it's just the two of us because the two of us can get a lot of points across too. So we do it both ways. Then what we do is I have a VA. I admit it. I have a VA. I did not want to do all this work myself. But I did it first. I learned all the stuff Jason talked about all on my own, trial and error, completely 100%. Did everything from finding the Libsyn, figuring that out, doing, I figured out how to get in the new, what is that called? And this was so long ago, but in the new and noteworthy on iTunes, news and whatever that's called. But I got in there. So that's one thing that, if you're a brand new podcast and you really want to get in the top of iTunes, you want to pre-record about 10 of them, maybe 10, 15, before you even load them into iTunes. I did it wrong, trial and error, but I still made it. But I did it wrong, because I took Jason's advice. I just did it. I think just doing it and taking that leap. So then the turnaround process goes to, we get the download from Blab. You get the audio, which is so nice compared to when we did it on Google Hangouts. We only got the video, and then we had to convert it to audio to put it onto Libsyn. So this is really nice because it already strips it for you. So we strip that. Then the gal comes in that works for me, and she takes and edits that podcast as much as needed, puts the intro in. Then she also puts it out on a blog, and she even transcribes it too. So, if you want all those pieces done, get a VA. It's definitely way too time consuming and it's, very inexpensive to get a VA to do that kind of thing. And then what she does, she writes up that blog post, and then I go in and edit it and get it prepared to launch. So it's about a 3-week process because we want to be ahead. So we're about 3 to 4 weeks out in our recordings.
Okay. Because that would be my luck is I'd record something and then in 6 weeks, somebody say, hey, remember that time we talked about this and talked about that? And I'm thinking, I can't remember that time I talked about this or that. And it's like, being on the radio and 6 months ago, someone says, hey, I remember that one day you played that birthday song for my wife. And it's like, I can't remember your wife.
No, I don't remember that at all. That happens to me all the time, actually. I'll have people say, well, I saw you at a conference one time and you said this. And I'm like, I said, what? What was I smoking? So that happens to me quite a bit. I have a really bad memory, at least long-term memory. Short-term memory I'm okay with, but long-term I lose it. So, but what I would say to people who come up and say, hey, remember when you talked about this? Play along and play nice, obviously, but I think it's really just a tribute to the fact that you've got content out there that people want to listen to. And podcasts are not meant to be consumed in real time. They're meant to be consumed on demand. People subscribe to your podcast and it's like Netflix. I've had a couple of friends of mine who say, you know what, I haven't listened to your podcast yet. And then I'll hear from them a week later and say, I binged listened to 20 episodes just this weekend. So that's just the nature of media these days. People are going to consume it on their schedule, on their time. So think about that too, though, as you program your podcast, and try not to date it so that the material stays evergreen, stays fresh.
Which is more difficult in the social media side of things because it moves so fast.
Very much. The cool thing, though, about it, though, if you have conversations and you have a little real-time interaction around your podcast while you're doing it, if you're live streaming or whatever, that's great. It gets people's, eyeballs on it. It helps with social sharing, all that good stuff. And so, but then it has a second life. So you've got the real-time audience, and then you're going to have that long-tail audience that discovers it later. And the more of that you have, probably the more successful your podcast is.
Okay, good.
I agree.
We're trying to wait for Bridget to get back on here. Internet connection in California must be so good, so she can't hear me talk about that. But she will, because this is being recorded. Any questions so far for either Jason or Janet? Yes, sir.
This is a question for Janet. When you play music on your podcast, what do you, how much or how do you pay for that music? Don't you have to pay to play it?
Talking about licensing your music, Janet, and when you play music, what are the regulations on that?
You know what? We're just grabbing a song for fun, and I'm not stressing on that side of things. Now, if we were using that as our intro music, I think that I would never do something like that. That is, that needs to be up on the up and up. But when you're just playing a random song and you're talking about, what's your favorite 80s song, I don't think that's necessarily a concern. And we've actually changed that even because we sometimes don't have it prepared. So we've even changed that now to, what's your favorite 80s song, and we don't even necessarily play a song anymore.
We actually use songs in each episode of the Badass Radio Show. In fact, I typically use one song that's sort of a theme for the show. So based on what the guest and I talk about. And my original vision was I wanted to use Working Man by Rush, and that was the theme to the first one. But then I decided I wanted to use different songs for every show. So I actually did some research and realized that I probably needed to license that music. And so I hold licensure with ASCAP and BMI. I have to file a BMI report quarterly to tell them which songs I use and how many downloads that episode has. So that's the only thing that forces me to actually look at my metrics. So it's actually kind of a good thing. But the total cost for the year of licensing music for my podcast based on the number of downloads that I told them I think I'm going to get and all that kind of stuff was less than $400 for both of them. I think it's like $250 for one and $160 for the other. So when you're talking about music licensing, where you get into a dangerous area or a costly area is when you're playing a lot of songs to a huge audience.
Right.
So if you're a big market radio station, you're going to pay a lot of licensing fees. If you're a couple thousand downloads a week or a month and you're playing one song, it falls into a category that they don't even really check at ASCAP and BMI. You file a quarterly report, you write them a check for $200 and you're done.
That's what they had in around Iowa here for a while. The ASCAP or BMI police were out. They were hitting up funeral homes and they were hitting up town celebrations for all this stuff. And I remember when I worked at the radio station on Sunday mornings, we had a certain BMI religious program we played because ahead of time we'd researched all the songs that were being played and had all the artists already written down on a computer somewhere. So we just plopped them into the thing, and that's how we reported it. One of the funny things is, of course, when we weren't 24 hours, at 11 o'clock at night, we played the Star Spangled Banner. That was always by key. And so anyway, that was an easy one to write down too. So, Bridget, let's talk a little bit about your podcast or your show. Now, do you use that to monetize with that, or is that just information?
YouTube can be a guru show. You mean the Guru Minute?
No, more like either that or
I have ads on that, but nobody's retiring. I haven't even gotten a dime. And I know that Jason Tucker has ads on WP Water Cooler. But just to go back, because originally I started with social media because I'm a musician and I had a CD to sell. So that's why I wrote my own jingle, because then I don't have to worry about ASCAP or BMI or copyright or anything else. And that was where "You Too Can Be a Guru" came from. That's the last part of my jingle. So, yeah. I mean,
original music. There you go. It takes care of it.
Well, I'm just saying, like, that's, as a blogger, I take my own photographs. Yeah, if you own the content, you don't have to worry about all these copyright issues, But yeah, we have ads turned on for YouTube. We don't have a sponsor yet. It's not like Audible.com is breaking down our doors. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Because a lot of podcasts are sponsored by Audible.com. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's more like, for me, I was in a job I didn't want to be in anymore. Let's just be real here, people. Are you ready? I see your faces. You look alive. So, I didn't want to be a secretary anymore. And I knew that with every video and every blog post that I made, I was digging my way out of Alcatraz, right? So I'm making the paper mache heads, and I'm spooning out the concrete wall, and I'm collecting raincoats because I'm leaving. Right? It took about 2 years, but somebody found me, and that's where I am now. And I started at the beginning of this month. So forget resume. You're putting this content out to bump up your street cred, to position yourself as an expertise for people to notice you, but also to be helpful. So for me, when I started my blog, it was because somebody asked me a question. And I figured if they're going to ask me a question and I'm going to make screenshots, then I'm doing it for the whole world. So that if anybody else asks me, I could just send them a link. That's the laziness, right? So don't tell everybody, but there's my trick. So when I got questions, then I just started answering them because everybody said, oh, you're such a guru. Why don't you just tell us how to do this? And I'm like, that's such a joke. Nobody's a guru. So that's why I named myself, You Too Can Be a Guru, because I thought it was just a funny joke. I was like, one day on Twitter, I'm like, yeah, if I had a social media consulting company, I'd call it You Too Can Be a Guru, because anybody could do this. It's not that hard. So it's more tongue in cheek, but it's amazing how many people are so like offended by it. Like, look, lady, I'm fine. Not really. It's a joke. People lighten up, But anyway, so it wasn't necessarily to monetize the ads as much as it was to, change my life. And I did. And that's what I'm doing now. So here I am.
Wow, and quite an impressive summary of a Clint Eastwood movie.
Thank you. I won't tell you how it ends.
My radio career is more like Hang 'em High. Anybody else? Yes. Sure. Do any of you have the resources or know where the resources are to create the intro and the outro to the podcast?
Oh, you can do it in GarageBand.
Fiverr. I mean, my very first one we did in Fiverr. We paid $15. And it was pretty good. Now the second one, my co-host actually recorded it himself. We found the music through, licensing and made sure it was, we paid for it, the music side of it. And then he did it through his voice through Audacity.
Yeah. I would say if you want to go a little bit beyond, if you want to do it yourself or you want to download some music and whatnot, Audacity is probably going to be a software platform you're going to want to figure out if you're doing an audio podcast. And it's not really that, it's a little technical. It's a kind of a broadcasty radio editing kind of thing. But it's not hard to figure out. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about when you see an audio readout of, a little chart of a voice print. And so you load the music into that, and then you can sort of edit that. You have tools to go in and crop and lower the volume and all that good stuff. So if you want to do it yourself, download a song that you really want to use as your intro music or whatnot, then you can go in and edit it yourself. But I would agree with Janet and Bridget, creating it yourself. If you're a musician, finding a musician friend who knows how to do it, or Fiverr is a great place to go for a lot of stuff.
Also, you can search for royalty-free music that all you have to do is give the credit for. And if you're a Mac user, GarageBand is made for this stuff. You can clip things super easy. Anybody can do it. And I highly recommend GarageBand for that. And it makes it easy to export to YouTube or to wherever anyway. So
I did see a question on the side here. It says, how do you get your real-time Blab audience over to their other podcast episodes?
Send them to your YouTube channel.
We have a group too. We run a group on Facebook that we always promote at the end of each show during the show and put it into the Blab chat, so that then whenever the show actually is released, then that goes into that group too. And then we obviously build an email list. The focus, of any marketing should be to build an email list. So we also have that side of things where they'll get the email too when the shows come out.
Okay.
Also, your website.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just to bring it back, that's the core hub, right? So.
Yep.
You should be if you one of the greatest blog fodders of them all is archiving your video, right? Because sometimes people go, oh, I don't know what to put on my blog, or I don't know what to put on my website. But if you're making these videos or, anything like that, you can put them on there. For me, I have my Guru Minute. I have a landing page for that, and I use the video gallery by Food Gallery. And so people could just see them all, in a grid on the whole page. They could just press play. It opens up in a light box. It's really easy. So, and Google Analytics on YouTube tells you your off-site views and what your refers are. So I can see that people are watching them on BridgetWillard.com. So that really helps too.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Is there anything?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I think that I see Jason's out of bourbon, and so I think that's about going to wrap things up. I really appreciate the three of you taking time this morning and stopping by, and I know that everybody here is really, really appreciate it. We're going to continue the conversation a little bit here, but I really thank all of you for stopping by.
Thank
you. Thanks for having us. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Iowa.
All right. Take care.